All right, so in this video we are going to be talking about solutions, and we're just going to be doing a brief overview of what solutions are. Okay, so we've talked about types of substances way back at the very beginning of the semester. In the beginning we talked about pure substances, and we defined them as being elements and compounds. We also talked briefly about mixtures, and we define these as a mixture as being two or more pure substances that are physically combined but not chemically combined. So this means that their composition varies, and it also means that they can be separated by physical means. So the first two substances I have here, sodium, this is an element. NaCl, we've talked a lot about ionic compounds. This is an example of an ionic compound. This is actually a compound, right? I've got sodium chemically bonded to chloride. And then these last two, salt water and air, these are both mixtures. And we'll talk about what types of mixtures these are in the next slide. All right, well, since this chapter is all about solutions, let's define exactly what we mean by a solution. So a solution is a homogeneous mixture, and that contains a solute and a solvent. The solute can either be a solid, liquid, or gas. It is the substance being dissolved, and it is in the smaller amount. A solvent can also be a solid, liquid, or gas, and it is a substance that the solute is being dissolved in, and it is in the larger amount. Things to keep in mind, as we talked about in a previous chapter, I can't remember which one, we talked about how some substances are soluble and some substances are not. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in the next section. But the thing I want you to keep in mind is this phrase, like dissolves like, and this is in terms of polarity. You are going to use this a ton in 1211. So what this means is that polar substances dissolve polar substances, and nonpolar substances dissolve nonpolar substances. And when you try to mix the two, mix a nonpolar substance with a polar substance, it will not dissolve. So the example there would be like oil and water. Water is considered the universal solvent. It will dissolve most things that are polar. And when water is the solvent, it is an aqueous solution, which is something we've talked about quite a bit already. All right, so this is a little bit of a review from the beginning of the semester. So we've just defined solutions, and as I mentioned, a solution is a homogeneous mixture or homogeneous mixture, which means that it is uniform throughout. So things, some examples of homogeneous mixtures that you would run into every day would be things like air, salt water, coffee, one of my favorites, any sort of a beverage like Gatorade or something like that would be a solution. Another type of homogeneous mixture is a colloid, and these are where you have small particles that are distributed throughout a substance, meaning there's no settling out. Generally, these are relatively difficult to see through. So examples would be like milk. Milk is homogenized, which means that it is a colloid. You don't have that fat in the milk separating out from the water-based solution. Smog is another great example. It's a picture of Denver right there. It can be things like aerosols, any sort of an emulsion would be a colloid. All right, and our last type of mixtures would be heterogeneous mixtures. These are mixtures where they are not uniform, and the particles will tend to be settle out, and they can be filtered. So suspension is an example of a heterogeneous mixture, things like calamine lotion or milk of magnesia. If you look at the bottles on these, it'll tell you to shake well before using. And that's because the particles will have settled out over time, and so you want to make sure that's good and mixed. And so you've got a relatively even distribution of the compounds that you want. Blood is another example of a heterogeneous mixture and a suspension. If you draw blood, you can actually separate it into its layers using a centrifuge. I'm sure if you let it sit over time, it would do the same thing. All right, and then with this last slide, this is essentially all matter that we've talked about over the course of the semester. So again, matter can be broken down into two general categories of pure substances, which consist of elements and compounds, or mixtures, where you've got homogeneous mixtures that have a uniform composition, and the two that we talked about were solutions and colloids. And then on the other side, you've got heterogeneous mixtures, which have a varied composition, and we talked about things like suspensions. So if this is helpful to you to go back and kind of help you organize matter based on their definitions, then this could definitely be helpful for you.